Hi, Anoop. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rachita.
Can you give me an overview of your work at Netflix?
Sure. So I'm a machine learning practitioner working in the recommender system group at Netflix. I love experimenting with deep learning based models to build collaborative filtering style recommender systems. And as the name indicates, collaborative filtering is really all about finding similar set of users all across the globe. Similar in the sense of what they like to watch. And then these models try to extrapolate from each other's viewing patterns. So I spend most of my time trying to do that, like how do you find these similar users, especially when each country presents its own unique challenges in the sense of popularity and what is available in those countries. So that's what I do at Netflix.
That's awesome. Can you tell me how did you begin your work in AI, and more specifically, the deep learning work for recommender systems? Like, what motivates you to keep working in this space?
Sure. So I was doing my PhD at Johns Hopkins University in statistical speech recognition, machine translation, and I was interested in integrating very long span language models in speech recognition and machine translation systems, and it was extremely hard to do. At around the same time, a student named Tomasz Mikulo from Brno University, who is famous for word-to-vec kind of models these days, he invented recurrent neural net-based language models, which really is a very long span language model. And then while working with him and trying to integrate these models into speech recognition system, I discovered the immense power that deep learning models typically have, and that fascinated me. Then after my graduation, I started working at Microsoft on virtual personal assistants. And there, trying to apply state-of-the-art machine learning methods, models, and deep learning, I got fascinated by the whole personalization side of things. When the time came for me to move on and change jobs, Netflix stood out because they are pioneers in personalization, and I really wanted to apply state-of-the-art machine learning to do something in the personalization space. So that's the reason why I'm in this space. And what motivates me really is just the difficulty of the task. If you think about virtual personal assistants or even recommendations, it's a hard problem because our expectations from a personal assistant, they change depending upon the situation and the context. So getting that correctly modeled is a very hard problem, and that itself is a very good motivation for me to work in this space.
That sounds amazing. Can you tell me how does the Netflix recommender system use both deep learning and natural language processing to provide the best result for users?
So I would like to think of deep learning as a machine learning toolkit, while natural language processing and the recommender system are applications of machine learning. More often than not, the underlying machine learning technologies used in NLP and recommender system, they tend to be quite similar. To give you an example, in natural language understanding and natural language processing, typically people use topic models to discover themes in topics. For example, in Wikipedia, you may want to find sets of documents which are science related versus politics and things of that nature. So you run topic models on this text database. Now, it's interesting that a similar set of models can be used in recommendations and in personalization to discover similar users who have similar tastes in watching movies or the product that you are working or building. So, it's interesting that a lot of development that happens in NLP can be reused in recommender system. And similarly, the developments that happen in recommender system can be reused in NLP. So the set of machine learning models that are underlying NLP and recommender system and many other applications of machine learning, they tend to be similar. The applications are of course different, but the raw technology, raw set of mathematical models, they are kind of similar. So we tend to borrow from each other community-wise.
On that note, what problem challenges are you currently facing in your work, and how is AI helping you solve them?
So there are a lot of challenging problems at Netflix, but the one that stands out is of promoting original content. As you know, Netflix very recently started producing its own content. Now, contrasting that to some other popular licensed content, for example, let's say Breaking Bad, people have this notion of popularity attached to these titles, like Titanic and Matrix and Breaking Bad. They have been popular elsewhere. People knew of these titles outside of Netflix. But when you are launching a new title altogether, people have no idea what that title, what that show is all about. So when you produce a lot of such original content, the problem becomes to surface the right set of original content targeting to a particular user. Because we don't want to overwhelm a user with everything that we have released or produced, because that's just too much information. So then the task for the model is to figure out what are the right sets of originals that you want to showcase and promote to the user. And this is a hard problem because a priori you have no information about those titles and you have no popularity information attached to those shows and titles. So on the machine learning side, it becomes a challenging problem. So I would say that's one of the challenging problems that I find myself busy working on.
I can imagine. That sounds very difficult. And of course, customer satisfaction is really important, and providing users targeted suggestions is only enhancing their experience. But how could your work be used for positive impact in other industries?
So apart from machine learning, like we love to work on machine learning models and deploy them in production, but apart from working on these models and socializing what we work on, we also work on the tools necessary to make this thing happen. For example, orchestrating your experiments, getting that final model run in production. These are necessary infrastructure bits that are essential to get your idea productionized. Very recently, so Netflix is known for open sourcing all these toolkits. In particular, very recently, Netflix open sourced a framework called Titus, which is a framework for orchestrating your pipelines and doing cluster management. Now, I can imagine all those startups who have novel ideas and novel product that they are working on, but they can't afford to have their own orchestration pipeline because it's expensive. It needs dedicated manpower to maintain it, support it. I can imagine that such companies can benefit a lot from Titus-like frameworks that we have open sourced. So in that respect, I think Netflix makes a big impact. And of course, the advancements that we make in modeling, that in itself has its own impact as well.
And how do you handle the process of internationalization, because Netflix is getting global? So could you talk more about that?
Oh, that's a very interesting problem that we face. A couple of years ago, when we were just focused in Canada and US and few Latin American countries, the problem was simpler, mainly because if the countries are neighbors geographically, the notion of popularity is kind of similar. Like what is popular in US tends to be popular in Canada, just because these are neighboring countries. It just so happens. But when you expand globally, then what is popular in US may not be popular in India, for example. So if you build simple machine learning based models on maximum likelihood principle, the models fail because, as the problem dictates, that if you have a subpopulation in India not favoring a particular movie that people in US favors, then you can't really pool the data together. You need to be aware of the local taste differences. So when we build these models, we try to make sure that the local tastes are preserved. And at the same time, we also take into account the fact that what is not available doesn't mean it's not popular. For example, each country has its own set of catalog. Stuff that is available in India may not be even available in US. So that doesn't mean that if it were available, it wouldn't be popular just because you don't see any statistics associated with that video. So the model needs to take into account that what is not available doesn't mean it's not popular. It just means it's not available. And these are hard problems. If you put, if you were to model them mathematically, it gets a little tricky.
I see. So we talked about entertainment in Netflix, and as you know, AI is becoming applied in countless industries.
Yeah.
So what areas are you most excited to see transformed, and where do you think we'll see the next big impact?
I feel reinforcement learning is the next big thing. It's already making huge advancements in a lot of applications and areas. To give you a concrete example, I'm not sure whether you have watched, but there is this documentary on Netflix available to stream called AlphaGo.
I have.
So that's a fantastic documentary which showcases the power of reinforcement learning-based machine learning models. Similarly, you can apply reinforcement learning to do dialogue modeling. very recently, Google announced Duplex, their conversational agent with Google Now. And to get these kind of models working, you need to have some long-term objective optimized, which is very hard. But reinforcement learning is precisely made to do that. So I can imagine applying reinforcement learning in variety of applications. When it comes to recommendation systems, there too I feel that reinforcement learning plays a big role. From Netflix's point of view, what we really care about is maximizing the user's joy and enjoyment, which is a long-term goal really. And if you can integrate reinforcement learning into building a good recommender system model, then that would be nice. So that, I think, is the next thing that we would like to try and see and experiment with.
That's really cool, yeah. Reinforcement learning is an amazing area.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned technologies where you think the next big impact is. What industries do you think the next big impact would be?
Well, dialogue modeling, I think, is a big thing. People really care about virtual personal assistants, them being proactive. For example, if I have a flight at 12 noon from San Francisco airport, then at 9 a.m. I want my personal assistant to tell me that, hey, it's time to get a cab and go to the airport. So this is proactive recommendations. Similarly, every morning I wake up and I look at stocks on my phone. But if my phone can automatically tell me without me going to that app and clicking it, that's a proactive recommendations. So that's one application I would think. The other would be self-driving cars, which we all know how awesome they are. But of course, it needs a lot of perfection. So I can imagine similar other areas where technology will have a big impact.
That's amazing. So what's next for you?
Well, I don't think we have really exhausted the breadth of machine learning. There are a lot of things that we need to try. Reinforcement learning is one of them. So I guess I'll just be busy exploring these ideas and trying to implement them, apply them in my problem, and see whether that improves our product.
That's great. So I'm hoping for a better Netflix in the future.
Sure, yes.
So where can we find you? Do you have Twitter, or should we keep an eye out for any new work or publications from you?
Yeah, both. I have a Twitter handle. I'm not that active, but I try to post interesting things. And very recently, we launched our research website at Netflix, where we maintain all the publications and talks and presentations that we typically give. So you can follow us there too.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.